there was a leaked memo in 2018 which seemed to suggest that the ACLU was some people in the ACLU wanted to get away from this idea that we are going to be doing cases
Yeah.
strictly based on procedural issues, not on content-based things. And the ACLU seemed to lose its mojo a little bit. It was talking a lot about issues that were subsidiary or deemed by critics anyway, some within the organization, some who had been in the organization, just subsidiary to like basic free speech rights and civil liberty rights. Does it are you guys back? Because like everything that you've been talking about today, it's like and the types of cases and the way that you're talking about them, this seems like the ACLU I remember from my childhood that was defending the rights of idiot Nazis to march in
Yeah.
Skokie, Illinois, and the ACLU where, and I'm sure, I mean, you're obviously too young for this, but when George H.W. Bush, said, I think
I'm
he
not too young
impugned.
for this.
Okay,
I I was I
impugned
I'm born in
Michael.
1971, and a
Okay, yeah.
card-carrying
So
member of the ACLU.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it's like, oh
yeah,
my God, like I could just
yeah,
imagine your development officers
yeah.
being like, oh, cha-ching.
They were
But
ecstatic.
that and it does come down oftentimes, you said this at the very beginning, it is about defending the rights of people that you do not
Yeah.
share ideological commitments with. That's what civil liberties is all about. That's the greatest tradition of the ACLU. So I mean, has your organization gone through uh, uh, you know uh, uh, a phase now where it is like
Yeah.
back baby and better than ever?
So this was very interesting. I did a lot of digging into our history around the time of the Charlottesville
Mhm.
conflict and brouhaha. And as you say, I'm not going to deny it, there was significant churn within the organization and a lot of staff members who said, every case we do is a choice.
Right.
We're an organization of limited resources. Every time you choose to represent a white supremacist in Charlottesville, you are by
Yeah.
definition choosing not to represent someone else. So
Right.
why don't you let someone else do that work? Even if we don't disagree doctrinally that they have the right to march
Yeah,
in the park
it's
if they
yeah,
want
but,
to.
we want to
Right,
do what we
right,
want to do,
right,
and yeah,
right.
there's an infinite
But
number
so
of
I
cases.
found this article from the New York Times in the 1970s by the famous journalist J. Anthony Lucas,
Mhm.
5,000 words in the Times Magazine, the ACLU against itself. This was before Skokie.
Yeah.
5,000 words about how the ACLU was tearing itself apart because some people objected to the ACLU representing the Klan in
Yeah.
cases and Southern affiliates, and some were for it. So I think these internal battles are as old as the organization. It's never been non-controversial within the ACLU, and the ACLU has always nonetheless done that work. Now, I think where there are cycles is, there's a zeitgeist outside the organization.
Mm.
And, obviously there was a strong, progressive zeitgeist in the era around Charlottesville and in 2020 with George Floyd and all of that, where, we're not immune. Our staff is not immune
Yeah.
to what's going on in the culture and what's going on in the politics. And so, the other thing about the ACLU, unlike an organization like FIRE, which is a single issue First Amendment organization, is that, and this isn't new, we've always done work on racial equality. We've always done
Mhm.
work on prisoners' rights, on capital punishment,
Right.
on abortion rights, on marriage equality. We filed our first marriage equality case in 1971, right? So this work
Yeah.
isn't new within the ACLU, but I think what ended up happening with increased polarization is at least a lot of the public communications around that work, ended up looking so progressive coded
Yeah.
in our culture that people didn't look past that to see that, hey, actually the ACLU is still doing cases like NRA v. Vulo. And, if you want to see this all in one place, David Cole, wrote a blog
Mhm.
post, defending the speech we hate, where
Right.
he sort of collected this year by year and said, like, we've never stopped doing it. Maybe there are times when it wasn't emphasized as much as other work that the ACLU was doing that seemed to some to be not core civil liberties, as you might put it, but
Mhm.
but supported our equality mission as well. Are we back? I think. Look, I would say, at a moment like this, strong support for free speech is not controversial almost anywhere in the free speech community or in the civil
Right.
rights or civil liberties community. So I think we'll know how back we are when there's another progressive president or a moment like that where the Trump threat is out of the way and we're doing
Yeah.
these kinds of cases. And look, we'll see. I mean, we um, I don't want to signal something that hasn't happened yet, but
Yeah.
But in the next weeks, we will be filing briefs in support of speech rights for people whose views are deeply offensive to many people in the ACLU community.
Mhm. Can you be more specific about that?
I don't want to on this one, just because I don't want
Okay.
to preview this one. But look, the ACLU of Ohio
Mhm.
recently filed a case on someone who was expelled from a public law school because of speech that was deemed as celebrating the killing of the Israeli embassy staff
Yeah.
by right we took on that case. I mean, you can always again, I don't want to deny. I don't want to give you a Pollyannish view and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, there's nothing to see here." No, like these tensions are essentially
Yeah.
always exist within the ACLU to some degree or another, and there are moments like after Charlottesville where they really spill out.
Yeah. And do you have a sense, I guess, within the kind of ACLU liberal or progressive community, is there a sense that wokeness, however we want to define that, or the idea in the same way that conservatives now seem to be saying, or people in the Trump MAGA orbit are saying, like, shut up about your personal causes, or if you're uncomfortable with something the Trump administration is doing because we're at war and we have to present a united front against everything. There seem to be moments, leading into the 2020 election, but then after COVID and after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and whatnot, where progressives did not talk as much or argue as much among themselves and were presenting a kind of unified front to say we need to be doing this and we need to be stopping dissent among our own ranks. Do you have a sense that within the broader ACLU community, or liberals or progressives, I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
identify with either of those terms, are people like, oh, you know what, we lost our way there because we're never going to be trying to undercut one another, but like we really need to remain committed to certain ideals that are very hard to hold up at a particular moment in time.
I really hesitate to speak for others here, but I will say I think there is a real kind of popular front, all hands on deck vibe right
Yeah.
now. I think people really do regard these threats as potentially
Mhm.
existential to rights and liberties. And in that context, what you're basically seeing is just unequivocal support for the heroic work that's being done. And look, it helps
Right.
that the most important free speech cases that the ACLU is doing right now are the cases on behalf of students who are being targeted for their speech and being
Yeah.
detained and deported for that. I mean, that's never going to be controversial
Yeah.
inside the ACLU community.